Okay, welcome back, and today we're still working with the scientific method. Today we're going to see the scientific method in action, and we're going to look at two cases here where the scientific method is used, and hopefully you'll learn about the different parts of the scientific method, how to identify or use the scientific method. The first of our cases here is what's called the strange case of the beriberi. If you want to read along while I read out loud, and then we will take some time and do some questions. Again, I'd like you to have out some paper so that you can try to write down some answers in between. In 1887, a strange nerve disease attacked the people in the Dutch East Indies. The disease was beriberi. Symptoms of the disease included weakness and a loss of appetite. Victims often died of heart failure. Scientists thought the disease might be caused by bacteria. They injected chickens with bacteria from the blood of patients with beriberi. The injected chickens became sick. However, so did a group of chickens that were not injected with the bacteria. One of the scientists, Dr. Eichmann, designed a new experiment based on his own observations. Before the experiment, all the chickens had eaten whole grain rice. But during the experiment, the chickens were fed polished rice. Dr. Eichmann researched this interesting case and found that the polished rice lacked thiamine, a vitamin necessary for good health. So what I would like you to do on your piece of paper is look at these 5 questions, and you can stop your video, and what I would like you to do is answer the questions down below. State the question or problem that the scientist originally investigated. What was their original hypothesis? In the original experiment, what were the independent and dependent variables? And then summarize the results from the first experiment. And then finally, how would Dr. Eichmann test his new hypothesis? Let's look at what answers you came up with. State the question of the problem that the scientists were. So I'm going to do some highlighting here. And it says a strange new disease attacked the people in the disease. Okay. So what do you think that was happened? Okay. So basically then what we're trying to find out here is what is causing the disease beriberi. That is basically what they are trying to find out here. Okay, that was their first question. Now, if we move on to the second question, what is the original hypothesis? Right here, if you reread this, the scientists thought the disease might be caused by bacteria. So again, hopefully you were able to look at that and come up with the answer. Okay, so the first two here right out of the reading. So now we have to look at the experiment. It says they injected chickens with bacteria from the blood of patients. They injected chickens, became sick, and however too. So what were the variables here? So we're going to go with the independent, and then we will do the dependent. So the independent, what did one group of chickens get that the others did not? Okay, and that is one group got bacteria, okay, while the second group did not. So that makes the bacteria the factor that they were testing, or the variable that they were testing. So let's move on to the dependent and answer that question. And what is the responding variable? Well, the response was, are they getting sick or not? So they are checking for the presence of beriberi. The presence of beriberi was their dependent variable. Okay, so write a statement here that summarizes what's going on. Well, if we look up here again, it says the injected became sick, but some of the others also became sick. So what were the results here? We can simply state then is that chickens in both groups became sick. Okay, that was their results. So if we were to conclude from that, we could say that the bacteria was not what was causing the illness, since the group that didn't get the bacteria still got sick, or at least some of them still got sick. So how would Dr. Eichmann test his new hypothesis? Well, the first thing you're going to have to do before you can answer that is figure out what Dr. Eichmann's hypothesis was. And if you did some or reread some here, he did some research and found out that polished rice lacked thiamine, and he also noticed that during the experiment, the chickens were fed polished rice during the original experiment. Okay, so what do you think his hypothesis is? I bet his hypothesis was that the chickens that ate polished rice were getting the disease, and those that ate whole grain rice were not getting the disease. So how could you test that? How could you see what that is? So I'm just going to hop down here. Again, we would need two groups. And in his first group, he would feed that group whole grain rice and check for the disease. And the second group would get polished rice and be checked for the disease. Okay, and then he would compare the chickens who ate the whole grain rice with those that ate the polished rice. And it did work out that he found out that those that ate the polished rice were only the ones that were getting sick. And the reason is because they were not getting thiamine, which is very important to the immune system. So here is a perfect example of how the scientific method, can be used to solve a problem. And sometimes when we first do the scientific method, this is a great example of we don't always get the answer we expect, so we have to form new conclusions. Okay, now I'm going to scroll down here to our second problem here, and let me do some backing up here since I added all of those lines in. This time we're going to talk about penicillin and Sir Alexander Fleming. Okay, and again, you're going to have 5 questions to be answering after you get done here. Okay, 5 questions that you're going to be answering after you get done here, all right? So, in 1928, Sir Alex Fleming was studying Staphylococcus bacteria growing in culture dishes. He noticed that a mold called Penicillium was also growing in some of the dishes. A clear area existed around the mold because all the bacteria that had grown in this area had died. In the culture dishes without the mold, there were no clear areas were present. Okay, in other words, there was no dead bacteria. Fleming hypothesized that the mold must be producing a chemical that killed in the bacteria. He decided to isolate this substance and test it to see if it would kill bacteria. Fleming transferred the mold to a nutrient broth. This solution contained all the materials the mold needed to grow. After the mold grew, he removed it from the nutrient broth, then added the broth to the culture of bacteria. He discovered that the bacteria in the culture died. Fleming's experiments were later used to develop antibiotics. So, state the question or problem that you think Fleming is investigating. What was his hypothesis? How did he test it? Summarize, and then what did all this lead to? Okay, what did all of this lead to? Now, when you come back, then you will be able to see all the possible answers here. So again, stop the video, write in your answers, and then hop back on. So let's get back at it. So, if you remember when I read through this and you read through it, he noticed that a couple things had some pinna, and in those areas where the mold was, the bacteria had died. That was what he had noticed. So, what do you think the question was? Well, it would be, my opinion is, what he is trying to find out is what is killing the bacteria in the culture dishes. Can't type very well now, can I? I should say some of. Okay, so let's move on. Next one was actually pretty straightforward, I thought, and it is, what is his hypothesis? Again, if we elaborate, Fleming hypothesized the mold must be producing a chemical that was doing that. Okay, it was producing a chemical to produce that. Producing a chemical that killed the bacteria. How do you think he tested that? Again, we go up in here to our reading. He transferred, again, he transferred some of the bacteria in the broth. He removed it from some and he observed it packed into this. Okay, right there is what we have. Okay, so if I can just take this, I'm just going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to come down here and move over. And I'm just going to paste that right there. Okay, not exactly what I wanted to happen, but okay. And then we get down here to the bottom, write a statement that summarizes those results. Right here in this next sentence, he observed the bacteria in the culture died. He observed that it died. And then finally, what did this measurement? Well, if we go back to our reading here, the development of antibiotics. I'm just going to go down here and write antibiotics and their development. He actually came up with and found penicillin. Okay, and that is where this comes from. Okay, So again, just working your way through the scientific method.